Welcome to the No Ceilings NBA podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on this special episode. My name is Nathan Grubel. You would know me on social media at Draft Deeper. Haven't recorded one of these in a while, but when I do, it's usually with a special guest that I just want to create content and ask some questions to people who are much more familiar in some of these areas than I am. Last podcast I did for the No Ceilings feed, I had Phil Beckner on, personal trainer, coach, to Damian Lillard and many other NBA players. We broke down aspects of shooting and how to incorporate some of that and evaluate some of that in basketball prospects and players. And this time around, I have Coach Tom Crean joining the No Ceilings NBA podcast, NCAA D1 coach from 99 to 2002, 403 career wins. Coach, listen, some incredible players: Dwayne Wade, Wes Matthews, Cody Zeller, Victor Oladipo, Anthony Edwards. The list goes on and on and on. So this guy is well versed to answer some hot questions I have today regarding the transfer portal, player development, how it could be impacting the NBA draft moving forward. Coach, how you doing this morning?
I'm great. Nathan. It's great to be with you. So looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, before we get started with a lot of what I want to talk about today, we're in the midst of the NBA playoffs. As I mentioned, you coached Anthony Edwards at Georgia. What has it been like watching Anthony Edwards, particularly over the past two postseasons, really how he's grown his game from when you were coaching him to what he's become for the Minnesota Timberwolves today in the NBA?
Well, I think it's great because it's a constant maturity process for him in his skills, his mentality, his mindset. He's always had a very strong body and very, very physically mature body, but natural strength, things of that nature. But his endurance right now is so good. And watching him play as hard and as long as he plays and the things he can do in the fourth quarter, it's really impressive. I mean, he just keeps getting better. The biggest thing I can say about him right now is this incredible performances are coming because of the way he approaches winning. And when he was younger, he wanted to win, but he also wanted to play well, right? And so sometimes your performance can exceed the level of what it takes to win. Right now, the level of what it takes to win is creating an incredible performance from him, and on both ends of the floor, and certainly in the leadership department, in the way that he cares about his teammates. The caring of the teammates we've seen from the beginning, and now it's just on an international stage. You know, the way he views them. But the bottom line with him is he's put winning at the highest premium, and everything else falls in line with that.
How much growth have you seen in him as a playmaker now in the NBA? Because that to me that's been the biggest thing that stood out to me is now it's not only that he's driving downhill and looking to score, but he's also looking to set up his teammates and really be a pivotal catalyst in what they want to do offensively. Like when he gets downhill and he has 7, 8, 9 assists a game, that's really when I feel like he's the most unstoppable on top of, everything he can do from a score. But when he's really getting downhill, focused on setting up his teammates as much as he is to score at the basket, I mean, he just opens up so much for that Minnesota team.
Well, he does. I mean, it's impressive. I mean, because he's playing the game, reading what it takes to win, and those decisions now. It's a trust of teammates. It's a maturity of the game. What I'm so impressed with is the way he passes the ball. Even when guys miss, the pass is on time. It's on target. It's accurate. It's there. He's hitting them where they can shoot the ball or they can do something with it. His eyes are up constantly, and I think he's got excellent vision. He could always pass the ball, but he also knew he could really score. And when you can score and you can shoot, I think the fact that he's shooting it at such a high level right now has helped because he's making shots when he goes to the rim. All right, he's obviously attacking, but he's reading help so well. So when he sees the help, he makes the pass, and he doesn't second guess it. And again, the on time on target, the on time has to come before the on target, right? Like you want the pass to be accurate, but you got to throw it at the right time, and that's what he's doing such a good job of.
100%. Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed watching him play, especially over the last few years. And I had to ask you about him because before we get into a lot of the stuff regarding the portal and where that's going, which is the meat and potatoes of what I wanted to do on the pod today, I did also want to give a little bit of a background to your specific coaching style and what you prioritized as a coach and as a leader. And I had to ask you about Ant because I feel like a lot of those things you talked about with him are going to carry over into some of your answers to these questions. So I felt like it set the table pretty well. So when you were a coach in college basketball, what were your specific pillars for coaching, right? So when a player chose to join your program, what were they getting out of you from coaching and leadership standpoints?
Well, I think first and foremost, you want to understand what the player's dream is. And certainly you're going to pick up what the family's dream is. Okay, but you want to pick up what the player's dream is. And you want to pick up, okay, you want to get an idea, how are they going to get there? How do they think they're going to get there? So a lot of times I would ask, okay, what are the 4 biggest things to get where you want to go? Because 90% of the time or more, it's going to be the NBA, right? So what are not at least 4 things that it's going to take for you to get where you want to go? And what do you want to get out of going to college? And I didn't want to hear, well, I just want to get an education. I want to be coached well. I want to play in big games. I wanted specifics. Those are givens.
Sure.
Right, to me. I wanted to hear specifics. And so I would always try to keep track of what those specifics were. But along the way, while you're listening to the player's dream, you have to have a vision for the player. You have to have a vision, right? And the times that I didn't have a real vision and still went with the player, a lot of times turned out to be a mistake, right? And it becomes instinctual. And your vision becomes very, very instinctual for the player. And so to me, I was always, as I got older as a coach, I was able to break up, okay, this is where I see it. I see this in 2 years. I see this in 1 year. I see this in possibly 2, likely 3. This is what's going to happen. So I always coach the player with a vision. And if you're doing the right thing for the players to improve, and you're working every day to build your team, but to build the player individually, that should lead you to winning, right? So they go hand in hand. All right. They go hand in hand. When the player wants to do the things that they're not ready to do, or they're not as good at doing yet, okay, that's when it becomes an issue. So I usually coached with a mindset of, it really wasn't about no. It really wasn't, hey, no, you're not a shooter. No, you don't do this. It really wasn't like that, right? I would have never wanted to be coached like that. I wouldn't want to be talked to like that. Right?
Sure.
I'd want to know, my thing was not yet. Okay? Not yet. Here's how we get there. So just trust me on what we're doing here. Trust me on what you need to do. All right? But we're also working to get what you want, right? We're working. It's just not there yet. But a lot of times when you say no, you take the onus off yourself as a coach, right? I didn't want the onus taken off me as a coach. I wanted to be able to continue to work and develop them, and because I had that vision for their skills of where they could go, and I wanted my staff to share the same thing. So I think the vision thing is part, but you've got to have. I recruited with 3 upsides. Okay. There was the character upside, and again, character upside is really maturity. It's work ethic. It's what kind of teammate you're going to be, right? And then I kind of built into a intelligence upside. How are they going to see the game? What's their spatial awareness? Do they understand ball you man? Do they see the ball, play their man? Can they see weak side? How are they on that? Like, you try to pick those things up because they're going to have to be great at it, right? You're going to have to be great at picking things up, running plays, coming out of timeouts, executing, knowing where your teammates need to be. Yep. And then the other big thing, which was the biggest jump part, was what's your athletic upside? Okay. And to me, in basketball, like I'm starting at the bottom all the time, starting with the feet, right? And you're building your way up. You're building your way up. When I watch a guy shoot, it starts at the feet. Yep. And so, like, you would be watching a guy athletically and watching him play. He could be missing a lot of shots. Well, how is he missing them? Because I'm going to study misses, right? Because so many of those things are correctable. So if a player had touch, if he had good feet, feel comes from awareness, right? And they may not always have that. But what's it like? So, like, the athletic upside to me was more important than the basketball view of the player. And you had to be on top of that. And because if there was an athletic upside, they could really make a jump. And I'm sure we'll get into some of this, but that's where every day you are working. Your vision for that player and for your team is about the character of the player and the team. It's about the intelligence of the player and the team. And it's about the athletic upside of the player and the team. And the athletic upside was not just left to the weight room and to the strength coaches. It was totally going to be incorporated into what we were doing in practice. It's stretching a guy's athletic ability and helping him understand what kind of athlete he was as much as anything else.
No, those are definitely some core pillars that you laid out, those three especially. And what you specifically talked about laying out plans, and I know that you've said this before on other podcasts. You were just on the Ringer Draft Show with Kyle Mann, one of my favorites in the space, and you were talking about how you develop programs for players and you design them with their professional aspirations in mind. With those three pillars, though, how much growth did you actually see from players in just the span of like one season? Because I can imagine some of those things, it takes 2, 3, 4 years for them to get better at. And even from like a maturity standpoint, I mean, hell, I'm 31 years old. I'm still finding new ways to mature and grow in life every single day. So
I'm doing the same thing. I mean, it's the same thing. You never stop. You never stop.
So realistically, like how much do you see players getting better just in the course of 1 year? Like how much of a jump do you think a player can make in 1 year? Because that definitely aligns with some of what I want to talk about with you later.
Oh, a lot, a ton. And when you have players that leave early, you have to expedite the process sometimes, right? And the portal has even increased that even more. You don't want to hold a player responsible, okay, for where they can't go yet, right? Because they may not be able to get where you want them to go yet, but you do have to push them towards it. And you can't be afraid of that. And you have got to, to me especially, and I think like Anthony's case was different because he was so young when he came in. He was a high school senior when he came with us. We had to start. The talent was incredibly natural. Everybody knows that. But we had to work on catching the ball. We had to work on being aggressive with his catch, not letting the catch come into his body where his natural tendency was then to go right into a step back or to dribble the ball on the side, right? He was so talented that he could get away with a lot of things. Well, a lot of guys that you bring in are very talented. Maybe not as talented as him, obviously, but they're talented in a way that they can get away with what they want to get away with, and they've had success. But I always lived by what got you here won't get you where you want to go, and it won't get us where we want to go, right? And so you live by that. You absolutely live by that. And to me, you can never be afraid to coach your star players, your best players. You have to measure the improvement of your team, to me, by your best players. And you have to measure their mental growth. You have to measure their physical play, physical strength, endurance, but you've got to really be able to measure their improvement. And to me, you're not only teaching the skills, you're not only building on that, but you're helping them learn what it means to truly be a professional. Not what somebody says in the way of, well, man, this guy's going to be a pro. Well, what's that really mean? What's that really mean? All the things that go into that. Being on time, asking questions, learning how to study film, learning how to prioritize your time, finding that time to be in the gym and work, whatever that time is that's going to work for you, because we're going to require a lot. We're going to require not only basketball practice, but we're going to have individual workouts, right? We're going to watch film. How do you do more? And I think that to me is so huge. And the people that can master that in this day and age are going to be ahead of the game, because you've got to be able to get a team to come together. But at the same time, you've got to be able to get players to improve considerably, no matter how long you have them. And the laziest, weakest answer is that we're not going to have them very long, right? We just got to get as much out of them as we can. We get them better. What's that for? They're going to leave us anyways. Well, if you don't win enough games, you're going to lose your job, for one thing. Right. And so you have to be able to get your players to a point where they're highly confident in their improvement, because that's where their energy comes from. It doesn't matter if it's the portal era. It doesn't matter what it is. A player's energy, okay, comes from their level of improvement, their level of understanding what you want, okay, and the way they feel safe and protected and cared for inside of the program.
I love how you've gone about answering these questions, focusing on who these guys are as players, but also as people. And I feel like sometimes in the evaluation space, there's a lot of conjecture with talking about, numbers and stats and things of all that nature. And I love numbers, by the way. I love data. Like any amount of data I can get my hands on, more than happy to use it in my evaluation. But there is sometimes we lose that. The game of basketball is played by people. It's not played by robots, right? Like there's certainly going to be imperfections. There's going to be challenges that people have to overcome. And it takes a special person to ultimately become and live up to their potential of what they can be in the NBA. Like you coached Victor Oladipo. He's one of my favorite developmental stories to look back on, because when you watched Victor when he first got to college, he was not the player that he ultimately even was when he left college. Forget about how much better he got in the NBA, but he developed significantly over the period of a few years, going from an off-ball guard who was defense first to bringing those things over, but also being able to handle such a greater on-ball responsibility and role for the team, improving his shooting for multiple areas of the floor, improving his decision-making. Like, how much credit does that go to a player like Victor in terms of just being the type of person that's embracing exactly what you're talking about, embracing adversity and overcoming challenges, as much to, the latent talent that you might have seen in him when you first recruited him?
Well, it's everything, because the character and the intelligence are what drove the work ethic and this insatiable desire that he had to get better.
Mhm.
And when we recruited him, I mean, everybody knows this story that's followed him, and we were the only scholarship, really. There were no other Power Fives that had offered him, and I don't know even how many mid to low majors that offered him. Maybe they had, right? But we were the only one. We were his only visit, and the bottom line is, when we recruited him, I definitely saw him as an NBA player. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Now, I didn't see it maybe necessarily how it happened. But
Sure.
you don't always see it how it happened. When we recruited Dwayne Wade, we believed he could play in the NBA. We didn't see it happening necessarily the way it did. How it
Mhm.
happens comes later. But you've got to have a vision and a way to see it ahead of time. So we definitely saw that in Victor, in the sense of where he could get to. But how you get to it is where the process really speeds up. And that's what he did. Right. That's what he did. His work ethic, his care. We're talking about a guy that graduated from Indiana in 3 years. And
Yeah.
Indiana is as everybody knows, a high level academic institution. 3-year graduate. And amazing stuff that he did. I mean, he just and he just continued to work. He listened, he bought into the changes, and then he worked on it. And we had people around him that were in his life at the school that could help when he wanted to be in there, and if he wanted to come in and shoot at midnight in May, he came in and he shot at midnight in May, and he didn't have to shoot by himself. That's the kind of program you have to develop. You have to build. You have to have people that want to be in there with the players, but that are working with them on the things that they need to work on. Okay, not just going in there to rebound the ball. And so he went from shooting 14% as a sophomore in the Big Ten from three to 47% in the Big Ten as a junior. I mean, that's an incredible jump.
Yeah.
And because he got better and better and better. But it all goes back to the recruiting with him. There were 3 things that stood out. Number 1, his energy. Number 2, the way he felt about his family and older people, like some of the coaches in his life, not just his teammates, but
Yep.
but people like Keith Stevens, Mike Jones, Kenny Johnson, how I'd watch him approach those people, but especially how he approached his mom and his sisters, right? Even long before meeting him. And then I always say this about him, and I don't know if people believe it or not, but I don't care. The other thing was his eye contact. At that age, the level of eye contact that he had, the way that he could carry on a conversation with you, what he wanted to learn, those things were incredible. So there's always something that has to drive your personal vision for the player, right? They've got their dream. They've got their dream. But a lot of times, your vision has got to outlast their doubts, okay? or their distractions, or their disappointments. There's so many things that go into the day of a player, a person, that can disrupt them and get them knocked off. But your vision has got to outweigh that. And you're going to have tough days when that happens. They're not going to like you, okay, certain days. They're not going to like you certain moments. They may not like you certain weeks. But at the end of the day, if your vision for them is still for them, right?
Yeah.
And how it coincides with your team, all right, to win games, that's the beauty of it. And that's why what happens later on is they learn to love you, right? Because you never backed off from that vision, no matter if they didn't like it or not. And I think that's the key to coaching. And I think that's getting twisted more and more now because of the transient society that we have, because of how easy it is to leave. And it's a different day. But you know what? Everything's changing, but how you win hasn't changed, right? There's different styles of offense, different styles of defense. There always will be, right? But how you win, toughness, competitiveness, execution, efficiency, details, skill level, being a teammate, all right, having endurance, being able to play longer, harder, all those things matter. They all matter. 50-50 balls. None of that's changing no matter what the salary structure gets to in college sports.
We're definitely going to get into how the landscape changes in a second. Before we take a quick break, I do like to ask coaches. So when you listen to the best coaches talk about how they structured their offenses and their defenses, how they adapted what they did specifically to their players' strengths, and how some of these things just could change from year to year depending on the type of players that they had within their program. Talk about how you were able to do that with some of your players, and how you went about coaching and scheming and drawing up playbooks and all of that. How much did you always adapt what you were able to do and structure to your players' strengths, weaknesses, and make sure that, they were some of the focus as opposed to them trying to adapt to what you wanted to do all the time?
Sure. Well, I think I learned the greatest lessons in this, and there's lessons every year in this, but I learned the greatest lessons in this going from Marquette on a team that had gone to the Final 32, had 4 players on that team that scored over 1,600 points at Marquette, right? And 3 of them played in the NBA. Wesley Matthews, Jerome McNeil played for a couple different teams. Lazar Hayward was a first-round pick, right? Yep. So we were very, very fortunate to have that. And then I go to Indiana, and it's a completely different deal that's got to completely be rebuilt with 31 returning points and all the different things that we had to do. So I had to learn truly how to coach a different way, especially with not having nearly as much shooting on the floor at all. And if anything, it made me put even more of a premium on what we were going to do with developing shooting and recruiting guys that could space and play and things like that. But early on, we had to figure out how to just be in games. We had to figure out how to not get our doors blown off. So what you learn is you got to put players in positions to do what they can do while you're developing them. And you've got to really figure out schemes. And you always go back. I mean, I know a ton of mistakes I made in my first year at Indiana that I would redo in a second. But while you're building it, you're going through every day, but you're learning what it's going to take for you to succeed. And so we never stopped recruiting to win the Big Ten, even if people didn't see that. Because you can win the Big Ten, you can win the national championship. You can at least play for it, right? So we never stopped recruiting for that. But we had to figure out how to move people that weren't shot makers, or move people that the defense wasn't going to guard, or to put in defenses that allowed us to maybe negate some of our lack of athletic ability or lack of length. And all the meanwhile, developing guys day in and day out to play for Big Ten championships, right? So you're developing them with that in mind, even though you're not there, but you've got to keep developing that. And that's getting harder in this day and age with programs the way the money is, but you cannot ever get away from that mindset. You have to do everything you can do with what you have to win that game that you're in. But when you go to practice and when you develop your team, you're constantly developing what they're going to need, not only for down the road of the season, but for down the road in the future.
I love that. We're going to take one quick break, and when we come back, we're diving straight into the transfer portal and all that good stuff. Stay tuned. All right, we are back. So, transfer portal coach, this is why I wanted to have you on. This is the meat and potatoes of the podcast. So, 5,000-foot view, right? What are kind of your thoughts on the state of the transfer portal in college basketball today? Listen, I saw a statistic that blew me away on social media that over 40% of D1 men's basketball players entered their names into the portal here in 2025. Like that number for this type of system that we have, this quote unquote free agency type of system, that blew me away. Like in giving your thoughts about where you think the portal at and where the landscape is at today, does that number surprise you when you hear that?
No, not at all. My last year at Georgia was the first year of the portal and the first year of the NIL, and we got destroyed in the portal, right? And we were still recruiting off Zoom and video. In my last team at Georgia, I had only personally recruited 2 people on that team that we had recruited, before that we took them off Zoom, right? And they took us off that. You weren't even able to give visits at that point, right? So to me, the statistics that first came out is they were predicting an average of a little over 6 players a year going into the portal inside those first 3 years. There was I don't know how they found the study. I mean, how they got to it, but that was the number they got to, and it's exceeding that. And that was I've said this different times. My last year at Georgia, we had $4,200 for guys that they got off campus. 7 guys doing a 3-hour clinic for kids. They made $600 each. And 2 more guys got $1,000 each from Crystal Hamburgers to do a social media ad. Well, now you're not going to find really anybody in the SEC. I don't know if anybody be under 5-6 million. I don't think you can compete in that league right now without that. So it's all changed. So none of it is surprising. But I think what it comes down to is this. Okay, when you look at the players, because is it going to change some? Maybe. Nobody really knows, right? I mean, that's why it's in the position that it's in. That's why it's so great to be a player right now, because of the money that is there for you. But if I'm in the NBA, if I'm at another school, and I'm looking at somebody, I'm looking at, okay, what did the money do to you? Okay.
Yeah.
How did the money make you react? Did you become a harder worker? Did you spend more time in the gym? Were you a good teammate who stayed really good, maybe even better? Did you improve your skills? Did you add things to your game? Did you win? Were you impactful in that winning? Okay, or the flip side. If you were not a great worker, did you become less of a worker? Were you less of a teammate? How was it after a bad game? How was it after a bad day? How was it after a bad week? All right, those are the type of things that everybody's going to have to answer. You want to try to answer that or get an answer to that if you're drafting a player, if you're taking a player, but the player ultimately will have to answer for that. All right. Yep. And that's where their job line, that's where they're, how far can they go? All right. Their learning curve, their growth plates, whatever you want to call them, right? Whatever cliche you want to call them. Eventually, the player will have to answer for that. All right. Not the agent, not the people that surrounded them. Now, you'd like to think they're going to be there to help you answer that. But ultimately, when you get in the line of your career, there's going to be nobody else to answer that but you. What did the money do to you? And I think that's something right now, like that's got to be at the cornerstone of, or one of the cornerstones of how you evaluate a player. And the player's got to be able to answer this. I don't want the money. I love the money. I love what this money does for me, but it does not change my love of getting better, my love of the game, my love of this, right? And this world is so centered right now on skipping process, right? On skipping how you get there. And you just can't, man. You just can't. I mean, it's something that you've got to continue to do. When I watch film, and when I watch players, okay, it's so much is going to be like, okay, like assists. I don't like assists, right? Assists are assists. The guy made the bucket, okay? How many assists did you try to make? How many assists did you attempt to make?
Sure.
Okay, how many passes were made that the player just missed the shot, right? So it becomes attempts and efforts. versus results when you're evaluating. Attempts and efforts, and they go inside of the skill package. You can't just measure things on results. Well, this world's measuring it on results. So you've got to make sure that you're getting your efforts, the attempts that you're making, all the things are coming because you are improving. And that's where the model number or the model name of what has to be, and the numbers have to back this up, is you've got to have efficiency. The NBA is still the best evaluators are evaluating the upside, but they're evaluating the efficiency of where that player is on those given teams. And now you're just going back a little bit further. It's gotten harder maybe to dive in, and you've got to do more work to dive into maybe to what a player's all about, but it's still there. The body of work has become more important than ever. And that efficiency better be high, right? If you want to play at the next level. Not necessarily, the younger guys have got to show some efficiency, but they got to show those attempts, those efforts, that improvement, right? And that's why the people that figure that out are going to make money from this game. And that's why the NBA draft is changing as we see it, because the portal and the NIL have changed it. But still, again, I mean, especially with the second apron coming in the NBA, the way you have to have younger players be more ready to come into the NBA. They may not help you win in the playoffs, but they help you get to the playoffs. Like, that stuff is so important right now, more important than ever.
You opened up a million Pandora's boxes that I could go down, and we could get lost on this podcast for hours. But given the sake of time, I got to try and hammer as many as I can in front of me. But I love to. I could literally talk about.
I'll answer shorter too, so we can get more questions. Go ahead.
No, you're perfectly good with what you're doing now. So when we talk about the frequency of player movement, right? Like, players are sometimes playing for 2, 3, 4 different programs now in this era, you know, depending on how many different offers they're getting, what the money's looking like elsewhere, et cetera, et cetera. And we talk about player development, right? And actually approaching from day one. Here's our vision for the player. Here's what we think they can become over X amount of time. But speak to this as a coach. So in this current era, a lot more older players are being recruited, but whether we want to like that or not, but a lot of rosters are being formed with older players because that's what we're showing is winning more with experienced upperclassmen are dominating some of these teams outside of, you have your special examples like a Duke, of course, that had Flagg, Knipple, Malawach, a bunch of special freshmen, but a lot of these older teams are dominating the college basketball landscape. When you recruit that style, though, how do you take player development into account? Like, does the pendulum shift more towards how can I structure and utilize this player to their abilities right now to help us win games today versus also balancing, developing them and what it's going to take for them to actually play at the next level? Like, how do you as a coach balance and approach that pendulum and make sure it doesn't swing too far in one direction or the other?
Well, if I went back, I'd do it the exact same way. You can't look at this like I'm going to lose the player at the end of the year. You just can't, right? It's getting almost to be a given, all right? But you can't lose. I shouldn't say a given. In some cases, you're going to know it's a given, you know, when you sign somebody. That's why you got to be so smart on the character. You got to be so smart on the intelligence, because what happens is this. Here's the biggest problem I see, no matter what the age is, but you really see it in older players. And you've got to be very guarded against this, because they don't understand the NBA is seeing the same thing. It's not about, you know, we used to all study, right? Like, if you really dove in, how do players learn? How do people learn? You know, what's the techniques that they learn from? Well, now that's important, but you got to know, do they want to learn? Do they want to change? Right? I should say, like, so many players, Nathan, they are so comfortable with where they are. They are so comfortable in their skills. They are so comfortable with what they've done that they don't want to make the changes. Like, I've always believed as a coach, when you take something out of a player, you've got to put something in there that's better, right? And you're never just taking something out and leaving it open, right? Oh man, this guy's going to stop shooting threes. Well, he's going to do something. He's not going to stop shooting threes. Just going to shoot them in a game, right? Like, no, we're not going to take shooting threes from him. We got to fix his hips. We got to fix his footwork. We got to fix his follow through. We've got to get more spacing. My last year at Georgia, I couldn't believe how many guys would not buy into moving their shot back and playing an NBA line spacing, being able to take those shots from there, being able to space behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Not bad shooters, but never going to be because we always spaced with the NBA 3-point line down since Marquette. Well, then at Georgia, I started spacing with a 4-point line that was 33'8" for spacing purposes, right? And yeah, you're going to have some guys that can shoot from that range. You better. Too many coaches that I see, they're not even close to teaching the level of range that makes their offense better in college. But because it creates more long closeouts, it creates more advantageous opportunities. But the player is never going to be ready to play because the NBA line is not going away in the NBA. So, like, the NBA line is just a starting point, right? You've got to be able to space. I mean, look at the best teams in the NBA. The spacing is all over the place. And I couldn't believe how many players didn't want to make adjustments to their shots or really buy into the level of spacing and the level of range they were going to have to shoot with. And that said to me, like, so many guys right now, they're happy with what they have. It's easier to be average in what you do than to really work and get a lot better at what you need to do. And you have got, now, we couldn't pick that up off Zoom. And they weren't bad kids. I'm not saying that at all.
Sure.
I'm saying they didn't want to make those changes. And so when you Zoom didn't allow us to learn that, right? Video didn't allow us to learn that. Being on the phone call didn't allow us to learn that. You got to see it. You got to see it in person. You got to be able to talk through it, all those different things. And so now, like, those are the things that have to come up, with players in the sense of how good do they truly want to be? And how willing are they to make the changes that's going to take?
Well, here's the thing is that, and I'm actually going to be doing a series on no ceilings over the weeks leading up to the draft. This is a spoiler for anyone listening to this podcast where my writing's going next, but I want to specifically unpack a series, and I'm going to call it So You Think You Can Be an NBA Role Player. And the reason why I want to do this series is because when you actually look at a lot of the players, now you can define role player two different ways. Like, some people don't want to talk about starters as role players. They want to focus more. So, like, they think that term means guys coming off the bench. I also can see starters as role players, but either way you want to look at it, you have the 2 or 3 players in which your offense is primarily built around. And then all those other guys, whether they're playing starters level minutes or not, they're adding to what those guys do and covering up other gaps to make sure the team is as complete. But even though they might only be asked to do 1 or 2 things at the NBA level, Coach, this, these guys came from college programs where they were probably the first or the second best player on their team. They were used to higher usage. They were used to taking on more of a workload, and they were able to scale their games down and find ways where they could contribute at the pro level. But they were probably more well-rounded players than I think some people might want to give them credit for, just based on what they're seeing now in the NBA. What you exactly talked about with players not necessarily always being open to adjusting and changing certain parts of their game, or maybe embracing other ways in which they can take on a little bit more to show what they can do at the next level, as role players, I'll give you a good example to kind of see where I'm going, right? So Jalen Bridges was a guy who I liked in last year's draft, right? Out of Baylor, combo forward, was primarily a spot-up shooter, transition player, and then he could defend a few positions at the college level. But he didn't get the type of on-ball reps in college at both West Virginia or Baylor that he would probably need to scale up into a role player, quote-unquote, type position at the NBA level. He had a good season in the G League for the Valley Suns, but when you kind of break down his player profile, he's not necessarily doing anything different than what he was doing in college. So he may be having a good season on paper in the G League, but it's not helping him get an opportunity for the Phoenix Suns at the NBA level. So how do you kind of evaluate some of those situations in college basketball now, particularly with how the transfer portal is? Like, if a player's just bouncing around, 2, 3, 4 programs, all they're doing is spacing, spot up shooting, maybe defending a position or two, but they're not necessarily focusing on some of those other things that can really accentuate their games and bring more out of them. Like, how do you kind of navigate that in today's landscape?
Well, I'll give you a great example. One of my best ones was Wes Matthews. I left before his senior year to go to Indiana, but Wes went undrafted, goes to, I don't remember if it was the Portland Summer League, but he ended up with Utah, right? Starts for Utah as a rookie, undrafted rookie. Makes the biggest jump at the time from a first-year to second-year player financially when he signs with Portland. He basically played his first couple of years and got on the floor for Utah based on the way he played in college. He could space, he could cut, he could pass, he could drive it, he could make some threes, right? Well, he got into the NBA, and then all of a sudden, look what happens. He just keeps getting better and better and better and better. The shooting becomes outstanding. The volume of threes with the efficiency of threes, the defensive assignments. He was getting the Kobe assignment in the Utah Jazz playoff series as a rookie. Well, the defensive assignment keeps going up, and he carves out an incredible career. But he had to make it a certain way, right? And beauty becomes at the eye of the beholder. And I think that's really true. See, I think it's never been a better time to be a senior or a fifth year in college. Never, if you're willing to make the adjustments you got to make. Much like what you said, okay? But this is where players make such a mistake, and they're making it every day. They're making it right now. Okay, the players that are leaving and going to multiple schools. Where am I going to get better and do the things that I need to do? There's a lot of players being promised they're going to handle the ball. Okay, they're going to be in ball screens. They're just going to be in movement, setting screens, or being a corner on college offenses because they're only going to have certain people do that, right? You got to train. We train guards as forwards. We train forwards as guards. There wasn't one day that our bigs weren't driving the ball. Cody Zeller had 9 ball screen plays for himself as a 5-man, basically. At Indiana, when I had Nick Claxton for 1 year as a sophomore, he had 13 ball screen plays that were just for him at 6'11", 7 foot, because they could do it, right? Because we were training and working daily to bring that out of them. But the vision was they were going to be able to get there. Right. And I think that's what gets missed. And that's why it's so important that when an older player, the body of work, the school's got to look at it and say, okay, does his skills help us? And can we get him this? Mm-hmm. And too many people never get to, can we get him this? Right. Or can we give her this? They say, okay, do the skills work for us?
Yep.
But then they don't take the next step. And the players, a lot of times, and the people advising them are not looking at those things. And you can just see it. I mean, when in TV right now, in radio, when I'm not traveling, I'm watching 7, 8, sometimes 9 hours a day of film. Sure. Right. And I'll get off with you, do one more interview, then I'll be watching film most of the day, right, for the draft. Like, because you just see, and you're not only watching the draft, but you're watching all the teams, you're watching all the other players, you're taking notes on the draft prospects, but all the other guys, and you just see it. You say, wait a minute, why is he going there? Yeah. They're not giving him side pick and roll. They're not giving him middle pick and roll. And it's just, it's not a negative towards the coach. I mean, coaches are all trying to win.
Yep.
But not everybody is looking at the player and saying, we've got to do this, and he's got to be willing to do this to get where we want to go and to get where they want to go. And too many times it's payday. All right, I'm going to get this role. Okay, I want to play the 4, or I want to play. You hear about this all the time. Okay, well, I want to be the point guard, or I want to be the 4. What's that mean? Right? Yeah. What does that really mean? Okay, and it's not about positionless basketball. It's about, what does that mean? Are you going to be able to guard those people? What are we going to do to make sure you can guard those people? Because you can play 4 in college all day long, right? But if you can't guard 2s and 3s and 1s in the NBA, you're not playing the 4 in the NBA, right? Like, we can go right on down the line, but there's just so little looking forward, okay, to what it's really going to take, okay, versus this is what it is right now. Here's the money. This is what we need. Let's go. And it's not making the product better. It's really not. Okay, there's nothing wrong with college basketball, but it's not making the product better. And because it's not turning guys into where they need to be to keep playing this game professionally. But that, again, I go back to what I said. The older guys, they get into the right places and they keep showing. Because here's the other thing you've got to be able to do to go be a role player in the NBA that nobody talks about. You got to go get along with star players.
Yep.
Right? You don't just have to have the general manager and his team behind you or the coach behind you. You better have those star players behind you because they got to want to play with you. They got to want to be in the locker room with you. Okay? They shouldn't want to have to practice against you because you're going to make them so much better. But at the end of the day, you're sitting on the sideline with them and they're talking to you because deep down they know you just busted their butt and they got better because of it. You know, when the NBA teams do practice, especially in longer stretches or training camps or things of that nature. So there's so many things that go into be. But last time I checked, man, being a role player in the NBA, that is one incredible salary, right? It varies a lot of ways. And you can carve out a heck of a career. Because really, Brian James, who's with Northwestern now, he was with the Milwaukee Bucks when he said this to us, but he came to one of my camps in the mid-2000s, and he said to everybody, our team, all the campers, he said, everybody in the NBA is a role player, okay? 90% of those role players, all right, have a specific role in things that they have to do. The other 10%, their role is to be the stars on their teams, right? To score the most points. That might be their role, but everybody has a role in the NBA. And he was right. He was right more than ever. But if you don't accept in college what you're going to have to accept in the NBA, it's going to take a long, long time. That's why the NBA guaranteed is studying why players are moving, not just what the salary jump is, okay? Because that explains it sometimes. But why are they moving? Right? I would want to be at a practice. If I was an NBA guy, I would want to be at a practice after a 2-game losing streak or after a 3-game losing streak as much as I possibly could. I'd want my schedule to be worked around that. Like, how can I go see this guy now that I like? And if they were on a great team, I'd want to go see them maybe after 3-4 wins in a row. Okay? Like how are they now when they come to practice when looks like it's getting a little easy? Right? Those type of things. Not just checking a box to go scout, but seeing players under unique circumstances, high levels of success, lower levels of failure. And how much can you judge and what can you learn from that?
That was incredible, Coach. There's a lot of knowledge. I would encourage everyone listening to this podcast to maybe listen to that back one more time, just that specific part, and really unpack what Coach talked about, because he dropped a lot of knowledge there. So how do you adjust that mentality though, Coach? Like, how do you adjust? How do you, as a coach, as a recruiter, how do you maybe try to adjust that mentality of thinking just about today and the paycheck? And if you come play for us, you're going to make this amount of money. You're going to do these things. But how do you maybe try and shift that landscape forward to back to exactly what you said, right? Thinking forward, thinking about what your career could be after this one season in college or after these multiple seasons in college. Because I do think, and you touched on it, I think the draft is going to suffer in the short term to an extent because of this, because you have your top 15, 20, 25 players that are a mix of a lot of the top freshmen coming in and some upperclassmen in there. But you have this period where it's like after pick 25, you're kind of looking at the player pool and you're not necessarily getting excited about what you're seeing there because you're not sure how much better some of these guys have actually gotten in college, moving from program to program and maybe not having some of that structure built into their day-to-day of, this is our vision, this is how you're going to get better for the pros. But then you go to another program, another coach could have an entirely different vision for you. Sure. And it's just that just constant change. Like how do we maybe try to combat some of this just from a player mentality standpoint?
You mean as far as a coaching staff or as far as the player and the agent?
And, well, I guess you could technically speak to both of them, but
sure. Well, I think it starts with who's around you. It starts with, for the player, it starts like the money is a given right now, right? I mean, the money's a given. Now, how much, this contract versus that contract, you constantly hear of bidding wars. I heard the other day, one thing started at $500,000, Within a week, it was $1 million, right? Another one started at 1.5. By the time the player signed, it was at 2.5, right? So like, there's a lot of time spent on that, okay? But who really understands basketball? And I don't mean who understands pass, dribble, shoot. I'm not talking about that. I think a lot of agents understand that.
Yeah.
How many people understand the places they're sending the program or sending the kid to what's in the program? And what have they done? I think this thing is going so fast. Like, you got to look and see, who have they developed? Everybody talks, man, we're going to make you a pro. What pros they have? Not what pros are on the wall when you walk down the hallway and see who the past coaches have had. What pros do they have?
Yeah.
Right? Who made it on a two-way? I want to know who has had some two-ways, who's had some second-round picks, because you said the draft is going to suffer. You know what? Yes, maybe. But you know what? There's going to be more two-way successes that are going to move right up. I mean, look at Brandon Williams in Dallas. He didn't even start the season on a two-way. He ends up the season with a contract, right? Like and my son's in Dallas, so I know more of the story in there. But it's like that kid just worked and worked and worked and worked and worked, and he made it the hard way, right? Like, there's going to be more of those stories. But what happens then, I think, once the kid gets to the college is like, okay, here's what the head coach does. What's his staff like? Who's working out my player? Okay, is it just going to be the GAs? Well, what are those GAs like? Are they rebounders, or do they really want to be coaches? Do they really know? Who are the player development people? How active is the head coach right now? Like, I think Rick Pitino, and he's not the only one by any stretch, but I think Rick Pitino right now, this portal, is doing an incredible job of selling the fact that he's going to be on the floor for those players in the individual workouts. And again, I'm just using that as an example. There's some, I'm not trying to negate other coaches, because I know of those that do the same thing. I did the same thing. But now all of a sudden, like, what? That's rare? That's supposed to be rare, that the head coach is on the floor with the players in the individual workouts? And I guess it is, because Rick is doing he's always been that guy, right? But now it's even a bigger selling point. So when a push comes to shove, the player knows, man, I'm going to get hands-on coaching from the head coach. That should be a given.
Sure.
Okay, but it's not. It's not. And so I think when in these situations where the staffs come in, you can't have weak links in your staff. All right. It's not about who recruited who's recruiting who can help solve problems, who can help talk to the players, who can get on the floor and truly work with them. Okay. And the worst thing an assistant coach can do is play smorgasbord desk, right? Well, I want to pick this at the smorgasbord. I don't want this today. I'm going to take a little bit more chicken, or you know what? They've got roast beef. I'm going to put the chicken away. I'm going to get the roast beef. No. You got to be involved in everything.
Yeah.
Everything. Okay. Especially if you want to be a head coach. Does that mean you're responsible for everything? No, it doesn't mean that. You've got to be involved in it. And if you can't develop players and evaluate talent and have a vision and help them get where they got to go, you're going to have a short life as a head coach if you get the opportunity. And I think that's what's so important right now in basketball, is who is helping the player really see what's there. And once they get there, who's helping the head coach really get the player where they need to be for the team to be successful, because they're juggling so many things right now. And it doesn't take any onus off the head coach. Okay. But the head coach has got to have the staff that they've got to be connected on this. This is where we're taking our team. And the only way we're taking our team there is if these individual players get to this point. So I have no sympathy whatsoever for the coach that thinks he's getting somebody on a one-year rental, or for the player that sees himself just as an independent contractor getting a payday. And I have no sympathy for the people that put them in that situation. I do have sympathy for the kid that doesn't know better.
Yep.
Right. But because they just don't know. Right. And that's where people have got to be so smart about who's on your staff and who's helping you understand as a player where you need to be if you have these dreams. Because now the big thing is, well, you know what? There's so much money. These kids, they know they're not going to make the NBA. Well, what? You're done playing basketball as soon as your career's up? You're not going overseas to Europe? You're not going to try the G League? You're just done? Right? Yeah. You go to Europe right now. How many guys you think are going to be coming back from Europe to the NBA with this new structure right now? I'd be salivating. I'd be salivating if I was a 2-3 year player in Europe right now, knowing the way college basketball.
We're seeing a ton of them, Coach. We're seeing so many coming over to these programs now.
everybody's seeing the immediate. Okay, years ago, long-term memory was measured by some group at 3 days. Right? We don't even have people seeing 3 days right now. Like, you got to look at this and say, okay, I'm getting the money, but where am I going to go get big money if I can do this the right way? That's why with coaching, to me, I don't care what, I will never stop coaching like that, because that player, see what's happened. And I know we got to close here in a second, but like, here's what's happened in coaching that's crazy right now. Too many coaches, but really too many players are looking to be into a situation where it's comfortable. Okay. They want to really like their coach. They really want to be happy, man. They want to be with a player's coach. Man, they want to be tight, right? And at the end of the day, when it doesn't work, somebody's getting blamed. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's when you're going to hate your coach, right? You're going to hate what you did. All right. Because somebody's got to be to blame for this. Right. And you wanted that coach, man. You wanted to be boys. Okay. Before you got pushed to be where you needed to be successful. Okay. And the way I coached and the way a lot of coaches coach, like, no, you think, man, if Anthony Edwards would have liked me every day, I was doing the wrong thing. I guarantee Dwayne Wade, Victor Oladipo, OG Anunoby, Nick Claxton, there were many days they didn't like me. But you know what? Deep down, they were learning that I love them.
Yeah.
Right. And they were learning that eventually they were going to love me. Now, not everybody does. I'm not saying that at all. I got players that never played. I got players that never got a scholarship playing for me that I love dearly, and drop what I'm doing to help them every time that they need it, or every time I think they need it, because that's what you do, right? That's what you do, because that's what you're truly coaching for. But what happens is this, okay? You're not getting the love for your coach or the love from your player down the road if you didn't push them through the days that they didn't want to do it, and push them in directions that they've got to go, because you know they got to get there to get where they want to go. They just don't feel like doing it. And we're not going to make the excuse because the guy's got all this money. But ultimately, it goes back to what I said earlier. What does the money do to you? Yeah. What does the money do to you? What's it do to your work ethic? What's it do to your mindset? And that's the measuring stick that players, to me, have got to look at every day, and the people around them. What's this money? Is it making him more of who he really is in a good way? Or is it making more of who he really is, or she is, in a bad way? And that's the honesty of it. Because with all this going on, you cannot lose the honesty. Do you lose some players? Yeah, you're going to lose them anyways. You might as well make them better, so that they don't come back to you someday and say, man, I want nothing to do with you. You didn't push me. You didn't develop me. You cheated me, man. You don't ever want that. You can have them mad at you. You don't want them feeling that they cheated, that you cheated them.
Coach, that was excellent. Thank you so much for offering all of those insights into what's going on and how it can affect players moving forward. I think you definitely validated some of my concerns, but hopefully, we have a lot more people acting as you would in these situations, and just focusing on the player first, right? I think that's a lot of where my concerns essentially come from. It's not necessarily about the money or this and that. I just want to see players getting better and living up to their potential, because that's what makes the game better. That's what makes it better for evaluators. That's what makes it better for fans. Everyone involved in the sport. That's what you want to see. You want to see those lives change. You want to see those lives improve. That's part of what makes the draft and everything special.
Like it's a daily process.
Yep.
This thing, it's like I said, it's an attempts and efforts, man. Attempts and efforts. And if you do a good enough job with those things, you get the results. You get the numbers. It's not how many offensive rebounds you get. It's how many times did you go. It's not how many assists did you get. It's about what were the passes that led to a good shot. Right. And that's why I said, man, I always study misses, because the miss is going to tell you a lot about what kind of maker this player is going to be. If you just look at what's going in and what's not going in, and we could talk, another hour about what some of the best prospects in the country are missing right now.
Yeah.
But you know what I see a lot of guys missing? Open shots, right? They're missing open shots. You want to go to that next level? You're not going to get on the floor if you're missing. You better be making at least 70% of your open shots when you're playing in the NBA. unless you are in superstar stratosphere of where you're going as a player, where they will live through your potential mistakes to get to your potential successes. But most guys coming into the NBA, they're not getting that because the veterans aren't having that. And so
It is
so much to learn. But I mean, I just hope that more and more people will take a deep breath on what they're doing, what they're looking at. And again, this is nothing about the money, man. Keep raising it. Why
Absolutely.
not? I have no problem with that, man. Like I said, my last year coaching was $4,200. I'd love to be in it with some of this money. I mean, but I would not change what I expect out of a player. And you know what? Because ultimately, ultimately, I don't want to hear, well, they want the bag more than the improvement. No, they need both. All right. You're not getting the next bag if you don't improve to where you got to be. And that's what this is. And the people that figure that out are going to continue to have success and be playing for championships every year. Everybody thinks it's about the money. Yeah, that's a big conduit. It's about the development. It's about the chemistry. And it's about getting people to play for each other in the biggest moments.
That was a bar. Put that last paragraph on a t-shirt and sell that somewhere. That was a bar. But Coach, I know we're up against it. Just really, really quick. We're a draft podcast. We're a draft platform. I'd be crazy not to ask you. Just give me like one or two players quick who you've already been able to study or even interact with and cover in person that, you know, if you were an NBA coach, you would be incredibly excited to have some of these guys come into your building from this upcoming class. Give me like one or two guys really quick.
Well, Con Knipple is going to be fantastic, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And I think he's going to be able to play right away. Everybody's got things that they've really got to get better at. But I love him. This is not taken away. I think Ace Bailey in 3 years, 2 years, right program. See, his is a lot like Anthony. Anthony's situation was not about going number one, right? That was great. That's what he wanted. Who had the number one pick? Right? Because this was more about, okay, we're on this path. He's really got to develop, okay, in all areas, mentally, maturity-wise, skill-wise, work ethic-wise over the next 2 years. That's exactly what happened in Minnesota. That's why you're seeing what he's got right now. He had the work ethic, trust me, he had that. But he had to be in an environment that was the right thing. And that's what so much of it is. If Ace Bailey gets in the right place where they are truly locked into his development and he'll allow that to happen and they'll allow him to see the game, I think it's going to be him. But here's one guy that I think is going to spend, I don't even know where he's projected, if he's projected at all, but I think he's going to spend 8-10 years in the NBA, and that's Will Richard at Florida. He's exactly what we're talking about. All right. What I've seen in the way he played. And I know he's been at Florida longer now, you know, past Belmont, but that's the kind of guy that's going to we're going to be watching the playoffs next year, and he's going to be in the rotation. I mean, that's that kind of guy. And there's others, but you asked just for a couple. So those would be my guys. And I think Derek Queen's going to be unbelievable as well.
Oh, he is a no ceilings favorite for sure.
Flag's the no-brainer because of how much he impacts winning. And the other thing I think about Cooper Flagg is doesn't get nearly enough credit for how great a passer he is. Right. And how he moves the ball, how it's on time, all those different things. We go right on down the line. But I'm going to go with Ace. I'm going to go with Con. I'm going to go with Derek. And then I'm going to go with the guy that's an absolute sleeper that's going to make it is Will Richard.
I want to have you back at some point close to the draft and want to unpack some of those guys and some of your favorite prospects for sure a podcast. But
yeah, I've enjoyed this. This is great.
No, Tom, the pleasure's all mine. I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to come on this podcast, and certainly follow him at Tom Crean on Twitter. He's one of the best follows that I have. He is, trust me, he is preaching the basketball gospel every time I see him post something on Twitter. So please make sure you're engaged. And thank you everyone out there who's been listening to this podcast. You can continue to follow us on Twitter at No Ceilings NBA. Make sure you're following me at Draft Deeper, and you're subscribed to No Ceilings NBA wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.